Good evening. Welcome to Larry Rinker Golf Live. I'm pleased to be joined this evening by my good friend, Mr. Mike Malaska. How you doing, Mike?
Great, Larry. Nice to be with you. Always is.
Well, it's always great to learn from you. I've learned a lot from you. You were the 2011 PGA Teacher of the Year. You've been a top 100 teacher for a long time. You're the Director of Instruction at Superstition Mountain and the Worldwide Director of Golf Instruction at the Nicholas Golf Academies. So I always enjoy talking to you about Jack and what's new, what's the latest, what are you preaching these days?
You know what was interesting is I'm doing a lot because a lot of it's not me. A lot of what I've learned is how sports cross over into golf and how similar they are. I mean, they tried to make it sound like golf's this mystical, magical game that's so much different than everything else. And the reality is, there's certain things if you do them, yeah, but you don't have to. And so this last week, I've had a number of big level baseball players. A lot of the top, Michael Conforto, one of the best hitters in Major League Baseball. I had Goose Gossage, Hall of Fame pitcher, Bruce
Right.
Hurst, and we got talking about baseball, and hitting a baseball and throwing a baseball. And so, what's the first and most important thing? And they said, well, it's your hands. I go, really? So, do you ever try to take your hands out of your baseball swing? And they go, what are you talking about? And I said, well, in golf, they seem to think you want to quiet your hands. And they go, well, why would you want to quiet your hands? And so it was interesting as we started talking about how you use your hands and how they develop their hand skills. You got these baseball players that are superstar baseball players. And what do they start with every day? They start on a tee. And they stand there and they just practice putting the bat on the ball the way they want to put it on the ball. Now, if they can do it off a tee, then they start with soft toss. And then they start having a pitcher throw it at slow 20, 30 miles an hour. Now, if the speed starts to come where they start to lose control of what's going on, they don't speed up. They don't say, pitcher,
Slow down.
could you throw it a little harder and see if I can fix this? So, I'm standing on the range today, and of course we do it, and I'm watching these people, and they're standing there, I don't know what the hell they're doing. They're jumping all over the place. And I walk over, I go, what are you working on? Well, I've been struggling with this, that. I said, well, aren't you swinging a little hard why don't you try to just take it from waist high to waist high and see if you can find the ball? No, I'm working on my full swing. I'm going, no wonder people are no good.
Right.
So these superstar baseball players, back to the point, I talked to Gossage about pitching. And he was talking about how you throw fastballs and sliders with what you do with your hands, how your fingers control, when the ball comes off your fingers. And we started talking about hitting a golf ball, and I just related it to him. I said, okay, well, if you want to throw a slider, if you throw this a little, push this a little harder, it's going to turn the face over, and you hook it. You push here, and he starts, boom. And it's incredible how good these guys are with their hands. And they start slow. They're not afraid to do that. And then they build speed. And if they lose control, they back off. It's what they're taught to do. Why can't we get people in our world to do that, Larry? Can you?
I don't know. How many times have you told somebody to make a half swing with the pitching wedge where you want them to hit the ball 60, maybe 80 yards, and it goes over 100 yards?
No,
How many times have you asked them to just make this little swing, and it's like it's impossible,
No. Which therein lies a lot of the reason why people don't get any better with, regardless of what method or what they're working on, is because they don't go through the correct learning process, which is, and Bob, both you and I love Toski, small swing success before big swing success, and everybody wants to make a big swing fast. And here's the other thing I get with people. So they're over there making a big swing, arms are all over the place. They're swinging. I go over and I say, well, slow down. Well, I'm only hitting a 9-iron. I go, well, your arms, you're still making full swing. I don't care if it's a 9-iron or a driver. Slow it down. Make a half swing and see if you can put the club face on the ball. And they try it a couple of times and they can't even hit the ball in the face. They go, oh, that's hard. I go, yeah. So learn how to do it.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Toski, because I was watching one of our professionals teach. Looked like a beginner because she was on the range and could not find the golf ball.
Yeah.
She's making these swings, arms way up, and can't even find the golf ball. And I remember talking to Toski and say, Bob, what would you do if you had somebody, one of those businessmen that maybe play golf in a business outing 3-4 times a year. They don't want to embarrass themselves. They come to you and they can't hit it. What would you do? He goes, well, I'll take him to the putting green. And I saw this going on a couple days ago, and I'm like, he should take this young lady to the putting green and find it and just find out what's going on with your hands. It's been a real travesty, Mike. I don't know when it came into golf, but this premise that the big muscles control the little muscles has been a tragedy.
Well, there's no question. From my perspective, with what I've learned about learning, your body, when you're a baby, and this is going to sound a little crazy, but when you start out, before you're born, your body develops structurally from the core out. But once you're born, everything you do is developed from tactile in. So you start to learn how to move your hands and feet, and then you start to do this, and then your body starts to move because you've got to do this. So we're trained as a human being from a small motor skill development to do it from the hands, feet, in, not from in to out.
Right.
So neurologically, you're designed, if you take your hands and you want to do something with them, and here's the task, then your body starts to figure out how to comply. Now, if your hands don't know what they're doing, your freaking body isn't going to make your hands work.
No.
I get the whole, your body can accelerate your arms. I get all that. I'm not saying that's not the case, but there's a certain level of competency with your hands and arms relative to face and on path that you have to have before you can engage what this is doing and make this be, let's say, an equal part in the role, or even start thinking about how you're going to transition and how you're going to move. Because if your hands can't control the face and your arms can't control the path, then your body's going to make a lot of mistakes. When they say that big muscle thing, I say, yeah, big muscles make big mistakes.
I like that.
And
How
it
about
really,
these guys that say, well, I thought the hands just hinged and unhinged?
well,
I've heard that.
I have too. I mean, I've heard a lot. We've both heard a lot of stuff. I'm not quite sure, or I know where a lot of it comes from. I read up on it and I see it, and I go, okay, I kind of get the mindset. However, when you look at learning and how a human body learns to move and learns motor skills, half of what's out there in our industry has no relevance to competent learning. It has
Right.
none.
Right.
And so the assumption is that people have a certain level of competency that they don't have, and they move to a next level. What that means is disaster.
Right.
And so I've spent
I want
my
to
whole
share something with you here. This is something that I've kind of been thinking about here in the last month or so. And here I am. I have a club in my right hand, and this is just really going to kind of show what the hands and wrists do. So here's the club head.
Yeah.
And here's my right hand.
Yeah.
So my hand is going to move because my arm moves. So I swing this club 180 degrees around the circle.
Right.
And my hand has gone here. So my arm has moved this far. My chest has rotated slightly. So if my arm has moved this far, please tell me what is moving the club this far.
Larry, you're being way too rational. See?
But we never talk about the flipper, the right hand going from extension to flexion, how much that wrist action actually moves the golf club.
Well, not only that, Larry, but talking to all these baseball players and Goose Gossage and these guys, this is probably your biggest speed producer if you isolated each one of them.
Right.
This, whether you're throwing a baseball, shooting a basketball, throwing, this is the deal right here.
Right.
The next biggest one is your arm's ability to swing.
Right.
The next one is how your body rotates, if it rotates in harmony with what this one's doing.
Right.
You know, so you're right. Not too many people talk about this,
Right.
but what you just showed there, your arm didn't swing very far, and the club traveled that entire arc, and your arm moved a couple of feet, and your center didn't even move. Which, by the way, that's physics of a center circle, because you've got basically 3 circles in a golf swing. This is one circle, your hands and arms are another circle, and the club head is another circle.
Right.
And you're trying to match out to make sure these circles through the ball that they marry out.
Right.
Well, that's not how most golf's taught today. This gets locked, and they want to feel how fast you can make this go.
Right.
And
Well, it's interesting. We have this, and I'm bring this V1 up again, but we have this word we use all the time, release. And it's interesting how, well, what is release? What does release really mean? And I like showing this video because we can kind of see it. But we know the arms are rotating and the hands are rotating. We know that wrist is throwing like the baseball players do.
Yeah.
We know there's even ulnar deviation going on here.
right.
And the left wrist is going into extension way before impact. And
Yep.
then the arms rotate and recock the club back up the other side. And obviously we have to have a sense of squaring the club face, but look, you know, where is the club face when it's the shaft's parallel to the ground? It's pointing about 90 degrees away from the target, isn't it?
Yeah.
And so it's rotating to square, and then it's going to rotate. Mine rotates a little past 90 degrees this way. So people have to understand that the arms and hands rotate, and the hands and wrist are what whips that club through the ball. If you want to hit it anywhere, you better learn how to use your hands and wrist.
Yeah. You better have some version of that.
Right.
If you don't have some
Right.
version of this, if you play when they say take your hand, I mean, I hear it every week on
Yeah.
take your hand, quiet your hands. As soon as somebody hears quiet hands, then they think that means this.
Right.
Well, if I had quiet hands when I threw a baseball, so if I let the ball go and my hands didn't do anything, or
You
if I
would throw it
served
nowhere.
exactly. So, or if my arm and my shoulder, if this shoulder socket was tight to where the only way my arm could move was my shoulder had to move it, so I had to
Right.
throw it.
Right.
And so you take quiet your hands and connect your arms to your body, and you wonder why why people can't play, or why
Well, and
can't
they
hit
try
it
to putt that way too,
anymore.
which is just ludicrous.
Mm.
But it's amazing how you talk about a baseball player, the hand goes this way. Well, all I have to do is put my hand here. It's this motion. It's
Yeah.
just not here. It's this way. And how fast that happens when I serve tennis or I throw a ball. So you better have some quick reflector muscles there in your hands and wrist if you want to create speed.
Well, and here's what's interesting. I get people doing that, and I'll have them stand, and I have them take a club and just flex and extend there, and just stand there, and what they feel is just flip at it, and they
Right.
go, and
Well,
they
that's a
all of
bad
sudden-
thing to flip at it,
Oh,
right?
I know. And they'll all of a sudden they hit one, and it goes almost as far as when they're making their big swing and they're doing everything. And I said, well, there you go. And they said, well, I flipped at that one. I will then flip the hell out of the next one, because that was actually, that had a chance.
Well, I think one of the things, and I'm going to bring V1 up again, but I really think one of the interesting things is being an upper core player. And what I learned from Toski is that moment at impact, the bottom line, if the shaft of the club has not caught up to the left arm, then that is not a flip right there. Now,
Right.
what happens after is violent, okay?
Yeah.
but you better have this club head moving faster than everything else right here. And if you look at that position, and I show you someone that is a pretty darn good player that I got to spend a little time with. But if I throw you this, and everybody doesn't realize he does this, but if we look at the Big Easy and you watch him, look at this club right here. Look, he looks like me, doesn't he?
Well, see that L to L, that lever system.
Yeah.
Creating those
L to L is what you're talking about, right?
if you create those two levers, then the club head has moved maximum distance and your arms have moved short. You've got the maximum amount of club head speed that you can generate relative to your arm speed. If that club head is straight out from your hands at that point, you put
Right.
the freaking brakes on.
Well, yeah, and we see it. And let's see if I can bring one of my students up, one of my recent students. I try to save the good swings for them, you know, Mike.
Yeah.
Let's see, here's one of my students. We worked on, look at his hips, get him here. But let's just see. Well, he's getting some rotation, but look, there's no hand and wrist. Look at the end.
Yeah, see, you're dead. Any
See
time
that?
somebody, their elbows bend more than their wrists work.
Right, here's another guy, an older guy.
Yeah, no chance.
See that? I mean, we see this all day long, don't we?
Yeah.
Here's one more. Here's another guy.
Oh, dead.
See, where's the whip?
There's none.
Look how hard he's trying to turn his body through the ball. And then yet you see me whip this thing.
Well, that whip, that handle slowing down.
Right.
That handle slowing down and the club accelerating that is the snap of the towel.
Right.
Now, how most people play golf, you and I know how to put the brakes on and let the club accelerate and let our hands accelerate the club.
Right.
So the handle actually slows down and the club accelerates. Most all those guys are just pulling the handle through. It's like if I took a towel to hit you and I just took my arm and I hit you like this.
Right.
Go ahead. But if I go like this and I go poof, you go, whoa.
Right.
Okay, well, they don't know how to create that. They don't know how to create that snap, which accelerates the club head, which has nothing to do with strength.
Right.
It has very little to do with strength. So you don't have to be strong to create a lot of speed if you know how to use those levers.
Right. And you're Jack Nicklaus. Jack said he felt like he started it right away from the top.
Yeah, he said it's impossible to start the club too soon from the top. You drag the handle, you're dead.
So Jack was feeling, that's feel. It probably didn't happen, but his feel was he started it right away. And to me, I don't have to worry about the grip end slowing down if I just think about the club head going faster.
No, that's
so if I take my hands, how fast can I whip this thing here? You know, everybody's drinking this Kool-Aid. How do I hit it further? You know, it's interesting thinking about Jordan Spieth, and it's great seeing how he's playing these days. And I think I can sum up what happened is he probably hit on a swing catalyst or something that told him that his lateral and rotary ground forces were good, but his verticals were down here. Well, he's low core. Dustin Johnson, low core, verticals are the least. Guys like me, upper core, we use them the most.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let's get his verticals up more. And then he went 197 in driving. So you got to figure out how you create speed. And we all don't create it the same way, but you better know how to use these hands to do it.
The common denominator, Larry, people can argue, and if they start arguing with me, I'll just stop, because the common denominator in every sport with high level athletes is they know how to create speed and control whatever they're doing with their hands. Your hands are the game.
Right.
The rest of you is important, but the better your hands are, the better you're going to be. All these tour players are savants with hands.
Right.
So they can stand up there and try any number. You and I could try. We could basically do anything we wanted to try. And what our hands would do is they'd go, okay, if you're going to do that, I'm going to have to do this to create speed. So we could probably make most anything work. But see, the average person hasn't developed that what we have. And
Right.
so if you don't develop that first, then the rest of it, it doesn't even matter if they do it correctly. It's going to be minimal. They're going to get minimal out of it regardless.
Right. Well, have you heard what Spieth is working on since he visited Butch Harmon?
I've, I'm not sure. I've heard some different things. And I can't validate any of them. I've seen some differences in his swing. Uh, so, but I don't, if I were to say, it would be me guessing based on not reliant information. But here's the thing about Butch too. I mean, I've been around Butch. I've watched him teach. Now, Butch has a lot of knowledge, but Butch might be the best golf coach
Right.
in the freaking world. Because Butch gets these guys to understand, like you were saying, he gets them to understand who they are, and
Right.
gets them to believe in what they have is good enough to do it. And once they start actually believing in what they have and don't try to be somebody else, then all of a sudden they start to show up again.
Right.
And then they have a belief that it works. And those guys, I mean, you know how fragile that is. I mean,
Very.
even at the highest level, they're teetering on a real fine line. And if all of a sudden they find something, which is them again,
Right.
and it starts to work, it doesn't take long. It's not going to take them 6 months to go, oh, this might
No,
work.
it takes them about 4 or 5 holes.
Exactly. 3 or 4 shots where they've got a funny feel where it was bothering them, and all of a sudden they click on something and it works. It's get out of my way. Here
Right.
we go. That
Right.
fast.
But it really comes down to getting and owning that release again.
Well, yeah. And what you said about release, I mean, this is release, to let something go.
Right.
The reality is there is no release in golf. What we should be talking about is how do you use your hands in the game?
Right.
Release is
It's a slang tour player term.
exactly. And if you say release to most people, they don't know what, I mean, there's 100 different terms. So
No.
when I don't even talk about it on my website, I don't talk about release. I talk about hand action. There's different ways to use your hands. Here's what I prefer. This is how it works. Here's how you
It is a good word to use with students that are strangling it, thinking they might want to let go of it when they swing.
Well, I've had them throw clubs down. No, I've had people actually throw clubs down the range.
I have too.
Just to get them to where they, instead of death, because what, and we got to be careful with that too, because they have such a death grip, they go to throw it and they don't let go of it soon enough, and it goes over your shoulder back towards the clubhouse. So
How much can you use your hands and wrist if you're strangling it?
you can't. You lock your
It's
wrist.
like I'm going to throw a ball. I'm going to throw a ball and I'm strangling it.
Nicklaus's number one key wasn't his grip pressure. Jack, his whole career, talked about his forearms. And he said that he wanted his forearms to be really soft. Now, if you think about that, if you all of a sudden tighten your grip pressure, your forearms tighten. So,
Oh, yeah.
so Jack didn't think about his grip pressure. He thought he got his forearms really loose.
Oh, wow.
And he wanted
Great tip. I can't wait to try that.
he wanted his forearms to stay loose throughout his entire swing, because if his forearms stayed loose, he couldn't grip it tight. I mean, you can't do that. As soon as my fingers clench down, my forearms freeze up.
Right.
So his trigger wasn't his grip, it was his forearms.
Love that. Love that. Well, the hands are so important. And our friend Bob Toski and the late, great Jim Flick were partners in the Golf Digest schools, started it. They really started what we do for a living. And it was always the hands control the face and the arms control the path. And so many people need to get back to that, don't they?
Well, yeah. And another thing that's interesting about where golf is morphing, I mean, it went through this stage where it was restrict your hips and an X factor and coil, which was absolutely, from a biomechanics perspective, had no relevance. It was just an observation that somebody made, and all of a sudden it became the magic bullet. Keep your arms connected to your body, coil, fire, get off your right side. Now what is everybody starting to do? You look at the Dustin Johnsons, you look at all these guys, they're starting to straighten their right leg a little more, let their hips turn a little more, get their arms a little higher so they've got more time to drop, so they can create more force into the ground. That sounds a lot like Sam Snead and those guys. So, what's what's really interesting is all those old guys, sit down position. This whole load the ground thing isn't new, for heaven's sakes.
No, it's not.
I mean, it's been around since sports or movement was there. So those guys talked about sit down position. So they'd go up and then they'd go sit down and then they'd hit. Well, that's force. So you're putting force into the ground. And they used to turn their hips more than they did there for a while. Well, what happened? The more they turned their hips, the more they could elongate the hip flexor, the bigger turn. And when those muscles elongate, then when they contract, it's a longer, bigger contraction rather than being really short and quick.
Right.
So all of a sudden, less pressure on your body, longer contractions, more time to build more speed. Oh, let me think about that for a minute. That might work.
Right.
So it's interesting for me watching how golf has gone through these ideas.
Yeah, I've never thought about what you just said. I think that's really great and that whole restrict the right hip is low core, the opposite's upper core. But now everybody's chasing distance after Bryson DeChambeau turned into Popeye.
Yeah.
And gained 50 yards. So guys are saying, hey, I'm winding up now. Heck with this short backswing.
Yeah. Well, the whole short backswing thing, I mean, I know where it came from and why, but the premise behind it and the reality of what it did weren't even close to the same.
Yeah. Well, I remember working on, hey, you want to keep your right knee in the same place and turn your hips, but the right knee only moves a little bit, not much.
Well,
restrict with the right knee.
You do that, and all of a sudden now your right hip doesn't move. Your right knee, if your pelvis turns at all, you've now moved closer to the ball. And so a lot of bad things start happening when that hip doesn't move. And when they talk about loading and creating force, again, the more your hip moves back and the more your shoulder goes back, the longer the hip flexor gets, which is the biggest muscle that goes from your leg. It's the only muscle that goes across your pelvis from your upper body to your lower body. It's the strongest muscle in your body next to your jaw. So the more that muscle gets elongated, then when it goes, whoa, it's a much longer, stronger contraction. If you kick your knee in, you shorten the hip flexor, and yeah, but it's not nearly as dynamic.
Right.
So now these guys have figured it out, and it's like, oh, wow, if we turn more and let our hip get out of the way and get up here, we got more time, more drop, more gravity, more momentum. We got more rotation. And I'm not quite sure why we had to get out of this in the first place.
Yeah, so they're talking about all this like it's something new, but Jack Nicklaus said, let me get my right hip out of the way. Let me get my hands as high as I can get them. Let me keep my back at the target as long as I can. Let me start the club head right away from the top.
Right.
And start trying to get speed at the ball.
No, I mean, yeah, and then his left side, I asked him about his left side. I said, Jack, when you hit, you always rock back. If you remember, Jack, he'd do this and he'd hit it and then he'd rock back. I said, well, why do you rock back? And he goes, well, I for sure don't want to go forward. And I go, okay, but so why do you rock back? And he says, well, Mike, the club's going forward. So I stabilize with my left leg and I push back because the club's going forward. If I push back, it accelerates the club more forward. If I go the same direction the club's going, I'm slowing the club down.
Right. Newton's sixth grade physics. For every action, there's an opposite and equal reaction.
Exactly. So you go, okay, he was just so instinctive, and Grout was so good at keeping him focused. And Jack honestly did not care what anybody else was doing. He paid no attention to the industry or any other player on the range. He didn't watch anybody.
Right.
He occasionally, Hogan, he watched him, but when Jack got out there to play or when he was at tournament, he didn't. I mean, I've asked him, he said, honestly, I never watched anybody do anything. He says, what do I care about what they're doing?
Well, I have a picture of playing with Jack at the Honda Classic in 1984, and I'm teeing off and Jack is next, and it's the picture of me holding my finish, and everybody's watching my ball except one person.
Nicholas.
Jack's got his ball and his tee in his hand, and he's looking where he's going to tee it up. there's a lesson there. You know, I knew I shouldn't watch him when I played, but I had to. I just couldn't.
Well, I know I did, and I've asked him. I said, well, he said, well, when you went to tournaments, did you look at other players? I said, oh yeah, you and Trevino and Watson and whoever. I said, yeah, I like watch you guys swing. He goes, well, no wonder you never made it as a player.
Oh, well, that is hilarious. Well, Mike, it's always great to have you on the show. Just got to pull this thing up here. But anyway, it's always great to catch up with you. People want to watch your videos on YouTube, malaskagolf.com. That's your website. And always love learning from you. You're doing a lot of things. You're in your home studio there where you're doing a lot of online lessons now. I think that's pretty cool. And you got a simulator there so you can hit shots and talk to people. I'm doing more Zoom online lessons. I think all instructors are. And
Yeah.
it's kind of neat that, we have all these tools and this technology to do it.
But we have access to be in contact with people more, which I will tell everybody out there that's listening. If you're working with somebody, if they don't have Zoom, have them get it, because the more consistent overview somebody has of you, where they can kind of, even if it's for a few minutes, and make sure you're working on what you're supposed to work on, the better you're going to get. And this technology allows us to have a lot more connection with the students that we have, regardless of where they are around the world.
Right. Well, Mike, always great to have you. Larry Rinker Golf Live is on Thursday nights, 7:30, 8 p.m. Eastern. Till next weekend, keep swinging.